Hello, welcome to Furious Driving and welcome to the future, because today we're driving not just an EV, but an EV commercial. Yes, the Renault Zoe van. Is it any good? Is it a tiny tax avoiding gimmick? Let's find out. Hello, welcome to Furious Driving, and this little slice of French loveliness is a Renault Zoe EV van, the commercial version of the electric equivalent of the Clio. Is it any good? Is it your next commercial purchase? Well, let's find out. Well, I've been using this thing for, coming up on 2 months now, so I've put a couple of thousand miles on this little piece of joy, and I think I've got to know it quite well. I found quite a few of its little idiosyncrasies and discovered what its real world range is like, because that ultimately is the biggest question with anyone looking at an electric vehicle. Now, first of all, let's start with the range, because that's already what anyone cares about, frankly. This has got a WLTP range of 245 miles from its 52 kilowatt hour battery. Now, that's actually quite respectable. Bear in mind that the basic version is £25,000, the plus version is £28,000. That kind of range puts it up there with the offerings from things like the Volkswagen ID3 and 4. Even the Porsche Taycan isn't that much better. Basically, this is the mid-range, average, good level, and it's here in this small van. In reality, when I've been doing full charges to 100%, I have seen up to 248 miles and down to 201. So it really is very variable, depending on how well you've driven it recently and what the temperature is like and all kinds of other factors. So it's not like you stick your 10 gallons of diesel in and you're going to go 500 miles. It's not as simple as that. But first of all, let's look around the exterior of the vehicle, and I have to say I do really rather like the styling of the thing. Renault's design team are on point at the moment. These big wraparound lights going into the big diamond on the front are very, very nice. A whole integrated look. The design is very swoopy and curvy. You've got the big curves in and out on the flank. You've got the protruding front arches, giving it a real powerful and purposeful look. It's really rather quite good. Of course, all the lights are LED for power saving, front and back. And also right here at the front behind the badge, we've got our charge point. And this is great because it doesn't matter which side you pull up on a charge point, you've always got access to it straight in the middle. Brilliant. Now, something I'm less enamoured with is the fact that this is a basic Type 2. It'll take a 22 kilowatt charge and no more. This bottom blanking plate here is just to remind you that if you'd paid a little bit more, you could have had the fast charger. This actually locks out the fast charging plugs. It means you are actually limited to only chargers which will take this smaller old-fashioned kind of plug, which is actually very frustrating because that seems to be the least common kind of plug out there, and there's an absolute bun fight for one if you stop at the motorway services and need to use it. Now, raising the bonnet, you'll release this big flappy plastic thing just here, not on the bonnet itself, and behind the big charging area you'll find not a useful storage area like you do on some of the bigger cars, but the motor itself is not much to see, but you do have top-ups to windscreen washers, and I'm guessing that's brake fluid as it's .4 written on the top of it. So this is the R110 motor, making 80 kilowatts or 108 horsepower and 225 newton meters of torque. So it's actually quite sprightly on the road, considering it's a very small and light vehicle. This big chunk of charging area here is what they call a chameleon charger, so it works out what you've plugged into it and will adapt to the best power it can, so whether it's a 7 kilowatt slow charge, 22 kilowatt fast-ish charge, or even just a trickle charger from your 3-pin plug at home. It works out what to do for best with that. So why is this a van, not a car? Well, because although it's still got the rear doors, the windows are tinted out black, so they're completely useless. There's no window winder, so you can't unwind them. There is still a door opener, so you can actually open them. However, behind the front seats there is a big metal bulkhead, which means that you can't use the back of the car as a car anymore. This means for tax reasons it's a van, so for businesses it's very beneficial. Having the doors there is actually quite handy because behind the seats you do have quite a large stowage area, so you can put bits and pieces, personal effects. There's room for the charging cable, which you will be using fairly frequently, and you can get to things that have slid all the way to the front of the load space, which is always what we'll take a look at now. Now, Renault says that this is a 1 cubic metre load space. It does still have the standard car parcel shelf, and there is a large removable shelf about mid-height in there as well. That means you've got additional visual security, so if someone looks in the back window they can't see what you're carrying in the back. If you want to tint this out, you can remove both of these things and have the full height. At its maximum, this is 1200 millimetres long at the base. Obviously it gets shorter towards the top, and it'll carry 457 kilos of stuff. It's all flattened off with a rubberized floor. Underneath there is additional stowage space, which if you take out these plastic brackets, there's room for an actual proper spare wheel if you want. Stuff can slide around this. I have lost a padlock in here somewhere, so I'm hoping I might be able to find that at some point. Also back here for your convenience, you've got a couple of load hanging hooks and a small light. However, there are no lash down points, but you can use that big bulkhead to put a chain around, and if you need to fix things down for security, use that. Accessing the Zoe van is by this remote proximity sensitive key fob thing, which is on paper a great idea. You just keep it in your pocket, walk up to the van and it unlocks, which is kind of useful, except of course it does make you vulnerable to phishing attacks from people with devices, and just walking near the van does unlock it for you. And also this thing is absolutely massive, so trying to find a comfortable place in your trouser pockets is really awkward. Stick it in your back pocket and you'll find you've got a dead bum in no time. Stick it in your front pocket, it's really uncomfortable when you're in a sitting position. It's not really a great place for that thing to live. Anyway, let's look at the interior of the EV. So, door cards, hard plastic, also hard plastic that looks like it's going to be soft, but it isn't. We've got a piano black glossy door handle here, which is fairly big and chunky. We have got a sturdy door pull, electric front windows, not one touch at all, just got to keep your finger on there to do it. Electric mirrors left and right, obviously no electric rear windows because we don't have them in the van. Interesting geometric shape with big grille pattern on the speaker thing. It's quite interesting looking door, very tall actually, very tall door, almost SUV-like in its dimensions. We've got a double areaed door pocket, so if you want to put small things like wallets or phones in there, they will not rattle around. Bigger area in the back, so we've got a bit of storage in the door, which isn't too bad. We have got a vast tea shelf area up here. You can put a variety of many tea drinking substances and containers up on here, which is handy because if you're out and about doing a lot of miles, you will find yourself sitting around a lot unless you have got domestic charging that will cover your entire day's work. Now moving down, we've got a couple of eyeball vents on either end, and we've got some little vents here in the centre that surround the 7-inch touchscreen, which is standard across the entire range. However, you do lose a lot of functionality in the lower range cars. The Plus gets additional features which you lose in the base model. On the passenger side, we've got a grippy floored storage shelf above the okay sized glove box, so more storage there. And just keep on the storage for a second, we've got a grippy area here where you can put your phone and plug in to get Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, available on all versions, which is great because they don't get sat nav as standard on the bottom one, so you do want to be using your phone for nav. It is fortunately an option. Got a little cubby hole down here which is just about big enough for glasses, and you've got 2 cup holders down here. And of course, being an electric automatic, we've got an auto parking brake. Let's move back up to the screen and controls. So a lot of our functionality is taken care of through the touchscreen area. On the home button we can choose smartphone integration, radio, music, the phone, car info and settings are all in here as well. You can see I've been doing an average of 4.5 miles per kilowatt hour as an average. So then we have our actual main monitor, our dashboard display. Starting on the left, we've got our church fund bar graph showing how many percent we've got in the battery. Currently it's 71%, you can't see that normally, it's where the charging plug would be. Also down there would be how many miles that percentage should equate to in our current driving style. This reckons I've got about 177 miles at this present point. Then we've got this movable panel just here, which can show alerts, consumption and usage data, showing whether you're actually taking power out of the battery or putting battery power back in again on the fly. We can show music and radio information, or we can show general statistics. The center section is probably the most important, as this shows the speed we're going in the center of this, which isn't actually a rotating speedo, it's a numeric speedo, and this dial here is just actually telling you how much power, or how heavily you're using the power at any given time. So that again is quite important. In the centre, in this big bank of what may be a lot more options on the car version of the Zoe, we've got eco, hazard lights and central locking, and below that we've just got our heating and ventilation controls. Air conditioning on and off, our front and rear screen heaters, because obviously being an electric car it's far more efficient to just clear the screen than try and warm up the entire cabin, and our recirculation button. We've got our start stop button here, indicators and lights on the left, wipers on the right, and then everything else virtually is on the steering wheel. Cruise control, speed limiter, the horn, and our menu controls are all up here on the wheel. The wheel feels like an interesting rubbery artificial leather. It's actually quite tactile and not a bad thing to grip onto when you're driving. curiously, and I'm not quite sure why they've decided to do this, they've put most of the radio controls down here on this non-moving stalk where you can choose the mode, the source, there's a rotating wheel on the back which changes radio stations, and your volume controls are on the tips here. If you want to get the volume control any other way, you have to push a button, wait for the sliders to come up, and then push the up-down buttons on the screen, which is massively annoying. I just want a volume button here in the radio in the middle. Why does every designer want to do something clever and interesting on a function that doesn't need to be clever or indeed interesting? It's just a pain, really. I mentioned the doors being tall, and the headlining is also extremely high. So the car has got an almost SUV-like stance, so we do have very high ceiling, which is nice and airy feeling. The seats with this white stripe down the side have a little bit of a sporty feel to them, so they are quite visually attractive, and they're surprisingly comfortable, even if they are a little bit high and short in the squab. Moving back, there isn't a back seat obviously, but we do have a space between the bulkhead and the seats themselves, which is quite handy for stashing bits and pieces. So, being a car-derived van, it's no massive surprise to say it drives very much like a car, which is absolutely a good thing. It means on a long journey you arrive relaxed and composed, and it's generally quite a comfortable and nice place to be. There's a good interesting mixture of materials, so although there's a lot of hard plastics and the steering wheel is a slightly low rent rubbery material, there is some strangely placed leather stuff around the bottom of the dashboard, which is a curious placement in a commercial vehicle. And there's a few slightly premium looking-ish parts, like the gear selector thing has got a leather top on it, and this satiny metal which looks quite cool as well. The steering is just heavy enough to feel good, but not heavy enough to be wearing on a long trip as well. It's nicely thought out. The Zoe itself is a good fun car to be driving, so it's a good place to base a van from if you need to be in it many hours during the day. The brakes are very sharp indeed, although to be honest you don't use them that much if you're driving the car in B mode. Let's talk about DB, drum and bass mode. So D is standard drive. That means that it just goes, then you brake to slow down again, but all you do is waste power. However, there are certain situations when you don't want the regen braking. For example, if you're going up a hill, it'll let you coast up a hill with a bit less resistance. B mode, now I don't know what B actually stands for, but all manufacturers seem to be using this for regen mode. And that means that every time you lift off the accelerator, you start getting a charge back into the battery. It's using the motors in reverse, and it rebuilds your power level, which is a fantastically useful situation to have. And I can actually say that, believe it or not, that even works if you're coasting downhill in reverse. So it works forwards and backwards to give you more power whilst you're driving around and lifting off the accelerator. So that's a good thing. It slows you down. They call it one pedal braking, or they used to call it one pedal braking when it first came out. It's a good way of regenning. It does have a bit of a clangy, plasticky feel when you shut the doors and that kind of stuff. It doesn't have a massively impressive Volvo-ish thump of solidity you might expect from a modern vehicle. However, Renaults do seem to have a fair degree of confidence in the quality of their materials, because it's got a 5-year, 100,000 mile warranty. That's 8 years on the battery. I guess most people buying these things will be leasing them rather than buying them, so that's the next guy's problem. Now, the main thing most people will want to know about on any electric vehicle is the range. Has it got the range? Well, it's actually pretty good. The best I've seen on a full charge is an estimated 248 miles of range anticipated from a full battery. In practice, it's probably closer to about 220. That is in optimal conditions. That's on a warm day, fully charged, not too much motorway, with the air conditioning turned off. It does have an eco button, which means that it softens your throttle inputs, it dampens down everything, and it actually limits the car's top speed to about 65 miles an hour, which is fine in most situations. But if you're on the motorway and you're alongside a truck which suddenly flicks on his right-hand indicator and means he's going to be wanting to be exactly where you are in a couple of seconds time, it's a little bit scary when you slam your foot into the floor and literally nothing happens. However, it does extend your working range just a little bit, which is always a good thing. Now, in practice, what I've found is that although I should be able to do over 100 miles to a destination and back again, if there's a lot of motorway in there, I will struggle to hit that. So my real world furthest away destination I would consider going to in the Zoe would be about 70 miles. So I've got a 150 mile round trip plus a little bit of leeway in case I have to drive faster on the motorway than I was planning to, or have to do a diversion or something, because those little unexpected things can really eat into your anticipated range. The problem isn't with the van is very good, and if you can get to and from your place of work, your jobs for the day on a single charge and charge back at home, it's absolutely brilliant. The problem lies, it's twofold. It's partly with the charging network, which is really not good enough. Sorry to say that is just woefully inadequate. There's not enough chargers, too many of them are broken, and there's 3 different styles, and this has got the old round Type 2, and that's the one you find most infrequently. So quite often I'll turn up at a charger and either it doesn't work or I can't plug into it. So I've shied away from taking it on many long journeys just because I can't guarantee I'm going to be able to get a charge when I get there, and I might not be able to get home again, which is terrible really, because it's otherwise a very good vehicle. Now performance wise, it's pretty decent for a vehicle of this size and price and all that kind of stuff. 0 to 60 is 9.5 seconds, although the initial 0 to 30, 0 to 40 is an absolute rush. It blasts away from the line, but as in most situations you're trying to save a bit of power, it's not often you'll be doing that kind of thing. Top speed is 87 miles an hour. I've not been able to check that because this car is monitored for speed, so I can't take it up to those supersonic, bothering atmospheric speeds to check whether it'll do it or not. But motorway acceleration is consistent and it keeps on pulling right the way up to, well, 70 miles an hour quite happily. Now there's only 2 trim levels on the van, the Business and the Business Plus. Now Business, which is the basic one, is fairly well loaded to start with. You've got the 7-inch touchscreen with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay DAB radio. You've got the fully digital dashboard. You've got cruise control, speed limiter, air conditioning with climate control, electric windows, no one touch I have to say, electric mirrors, heated front windscreen and rear window. If you go up to the Plus version, you get a few extra niceties. You get alloy wheels rather than the steel wheels and hubcaps you have on here. You get parking sensors, which is an absolute must on a van because you can't see a thing much out the back. And inside you get sat-nav, which is a big deal for some, not important for others. Now forward visibility is actually pretty good. You've got a nice big windscreen, you've got these little quarter light things here as well, so you can see past the mirrors. The mirrors themselves are a nice good size, and looking straight back it's fairly clear. You're a bit inhibited by the bulkhead, however it's when you try and leave a junction with a slightly awkward angle, those blacked out rear windows do make it actually really quite hard, harder than a left-hand drive car in many cases, because you cannot see a thing over that left shoulder in terms of what's coming, so you have to be very, very careful indeed. Get it onto a twisty back road and it's actually quite a fun thing. It's just a shame the battery isn't a bit bigger so you can't enjoy it a little bit longer. And for me, this is what is kind of sad with the electric revolution. There's 2 things really. First of all, the gearbox, everything's automatic. There's no manuals anymore, which is desperately sad because I do find automatics a bit weird and a bit boring. And secondly, if you want to enjoy these cars, because some of them are actually quite good, the chassis on this thing is really quite decent. But if you put your foot down and actually enjoy that capability, you whack your MPG down so fast that you just run out of power in absolutely no time. Now I've used this van as much as I possibly can over the last few weeks, and I've put certainly a couple of thousand miles on it. I think I've really got to know it quite well, and I actually quite like it. I don't still enjoy the automatic function of the direct drive gearbox, and it does worry me how well the materials and things will hold up over the long term, because I mean I've already got a rattle in the tailgate. When you open and close it you can hear something rolling around inside there, but it's not a bad thing to live with. The steering's nice, the ride's good. It's actually quite a fun thing to drive around. The stereo's pretty good. I've been getting through my audio books at quite a rate of knots in this thing. And I wouldn't say that I've got range anxiety in this. I know pretty much exactly what I'll get from it, so I can drive fairly confidently knowing I'm not going to have a problem, as long as I'm driving within that range, because getting a recharge on the road, it just feels like a bit of a lottery at the moment. Now take your own financial advice regarding this, but these are very cheap to run. Getting past the £28,000 purchase price, which is I think quite steep. I think you really would want to go for the more expensive 28,000 Business Plus, because the faster charger at the front is an absolute essential. I would not buy any electric vehicle with only the Type 2 charger on it, or even lease it. It would just become a liability in no time. But your road tax is nil. You can drive it in and out the AYLES zone if you live near a AYLES zone. Congestion charges may vary. Because it's a commercial vehicle, you don't have benefit in kind tax. Your tax and running costs for the business will be very good indeed, because you can claim back so much of the running costs and the purchase costs. Not all of it. Only the tax on the monthly payments. Let's make that very clear indeed. I think some people seem to think that you can claim back the entirety of your monthly costs. It's not. It's just the VAT, or half of the VAT, and the entirety of the tax. So the question is, would I have one for my business? Well, almost, but not quite. If the range was around 400 miles, I would probably be happy to consider one. But with 250 miles, that's going to be absolutely loads for an awful lot of companies. So thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed and found this useful, perhaps even informative. If you have, please do, as always, hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment, share, all the usual stuff. You know what to do, and we'll see you again next time driving something completely different.